Hello everyone, and welcome to another look through of one of the classes for my DST D&D skill tree system that I made, where you can basically go through a skill tree like you would in certain video games and upgrade your character in a more varied, more customizable way than regular D&D offers. If you want to know more about how this system works, you can check out this video which I made, which explains the whole system. But if you know what's going on, let's get into the Shepherd. Now, what is the Shepherd, you might ask? It's not a class that's from Pathfinder, and it's not a class from D&D. Those are the two systems that I've kind of been using for most of the classes that I made for this so far, that I've discussed at least. But the Shepherd is actually one I made myself. And the reason I've made a lot of the classes is because I needed to fill gaps that the base game has in subclasses, because my subclass system obviously works quite a bit different than regular D&Ds. And so in order to fill certain of these gaps, I needed to make classes that you could take as a subclass to give you the features that you would have got. For example, the Ranger doesn't give you a Beast Companion in their skill tree. But if you take Trainer as your subclass when you're taking Ranger, you can get a Beast Companion. Or you could just take Trainer as your main class and really focus in on the premise of having a companion animal or creature that fights alongside you. The same is for something like a Echo Knight. The fighter skill tree, we did not see any features that even closely resemble the Echo Knight. But the premise behind the system is that instead of having just a subclass of a class that gives you those features, there's an entire class that you can fully dive into if you really like the effects of something like the Echo Knight. The Echo Knight's example that I'm giving is the Chieftain class, and I'll reach that at some point, but for now we're talking about the Shepherd. And where I want to stand with the Shepherd is that the Shepherd doesn't necessarily scratch a specific subclass itch like the Chieftain and Trainers that I've been discussing in this like rundown before the video starts. But what the Shepherd does is I wanted to give you the ability to play a class that either really focuses on staves, which there isn't really a base class that does that, or really hone in on using a sling. So the flavor behind the Shepherd is that you're, that David and Goliath type fighter that would protect their flock of sheep from dangerous animals using just a sling or just a staff. Young-blooded, non-barbaric in a way, but more of a I need to get this done, and so I'm going to exert as much energy as possible to finish the task at hand. That's the flavor that I was going for when I made the Shepherd. I'm not sure how well I did. You can tell me how well I did in the comments below, but let's get into the class. This is a martial class, and it has a D8 hit dice, as well as having wisdom as your spell stat. Now, a martial class having a D8 hit dice might seem a bit low, but you'll realize later that this class gets a lot of defensive benefits and can also boost their HP a ton with a later feature. But we'll start right here. But let's get started with the starting benefits of the Shepherd. You get 8 plus your Constitution modifier in hit points, 1 hit dice, proficiency in slings and quarterstaffs, light and medium armor, and you get to choose one set of tools. You'll get Wisdom and Constitution saving throw proficiencies. Constitution and Wisdom proficiencies actually are some of the best saving throws to have. And you get to choose 2 from Acrobatics, Stealth, Athletics, History, Insight, Intimidation, Perception, and Survival. And if you're taking Shepherd as your main class or getting it from some other way, you'll get Stamina from this first note. Stamina is kind of the base feature that the Shepherd gets that really is their main ability. It says that you have a well of energy within yourself in which you are prepared to pull from at a moment's notice. You have stamina points equal to your Constitution modifier, and you recover all expended uses on a long rest. When you roll initiative, you add your number of remaining stamina points to the roll. This does not expend the stamina points. So for now, this is kind of just an initiative buff. It doesn't really do a whole lot of other stuff. You really got to start taking more nodes in Shepherd if you want to see the effects of what stamina can do. But for now, we'll have a Constitution modifier amount of them, later getting more. Let's go down this center path first, picking up intake hits. Intake hits says that when you take a source of non-force damage, you can expend a stamina point to reduce the damage by your nodes in Shepherd. If this reduces the damage to 0, any remaining reduction is converted to temporary hit points. Pretty nice. Now, your nodes in Shepherd are especially going to be pretty low. If you're taking a full class Shepherd, at level 1 it'll be 3, which, I mean, that's not terrible for level 1, but you'll see the more benefits of this when you take more nodes in Shepherd. And if you take just a small amount of damage, you can boost yourself with a ton of temporary hit points, so it never wastes any of the damage reduction, which is pretty nice. Next up, we'll pick up an ability score improvement. Like I said earlier, this is a martial class, so you'll be getting a decent chunk of feats and ability score improvements. And we can grab Charging Herd. This says that when you roll initiative, you can choose up to your wisdom modifier creatures to gain a bonus to their initiative roll equal to your proficiency bonus. So this is another one of those features where the Shepherd is really good at not only buffing themselves, but buffing their friends and nearby allies at the same time. But they don't usually do that by buffing themselves and their allies at once. They usually have different buffs for their allies compared to their own buffs. And you'll see that as we continue down the road. But the next node we can pick up is Lead the Masses. This says that when a creature you can see takes damage that reduce them to 0 hit points, you can spend a stamina point to reduce the damage they take to 0 and transfer any temporary hit points from you to them. Literally just like a healing ability. And this is on sight. One of the actual best ways to heal, to keep an ally alive in combat. This is not actual healing, but if you have temporary hit points on yourself, say you were, I don't know, have some feature that tops you off with temporary hit points, or perhaps an ally cast something on you that gave you temporary hit points, you can transfer those to your ally as well, which is super nice because if they just got hit and reduced to 0 hit points, they probably weren't very high to begin with, or they took a huge hit, in which case you reduce the damage to 0 with just 1 stamina point, which is super cool. Next up, we can pick up a feat, and we'll take the right path first here to grab Wise Stature. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that the Shepherd gets more stamina points and also better hit points. This is probably the best feature of the entire class, but it says that you gain a boost to your Constitution modifier equal to your Wisdom modifier, which is, I mean, it's actually one of the best features to have if you're going for a spellcaster that wants a decent Constitution modifier. Not only does this boost your hit points, I mean, equal to your Wisdom modifier, and this is not a boost to your Constitution score. It's a boost to your Constitution modifier. So if you have a Constitution modifier of +3 and you have a Wisdom modifier of +3, your Constitution modifier is now considered +6, which means you're putting 3 more points of health on you for every level you've taken so far, and all of your Constitution saving throws are made with +6. Super nice. Also, this does mean that you'll have more stamina points because your Constitution score is technically going up. We'll then pick up a proficiency bonus increase, and we can grab Employ Faith. Employ Faith says that once per day, you can employ a force so powerful a mere mortal couldn't possibly be the source. You must have at least 1 stamina point remaining to use this ability. On an attack that hits, you can expend all remaining stamina points to replace any damage that would have been dealt with 1 D100 force damage. This is honestly kind of a more flavorful ability than anything. It's not actually that good because there's ways to get much higher damage than a 1d100. I mean, the average roll of a d100 is like 51. So you can definitely get better damage, but it is a very fun and flavorful ability to have one basically backup nuker option on your character just in case of emergencies. This does take all of your stamina points to do, though. And for a 10 node commitment over here, we have Entitled Enforcement. This says that when you deal damage to a creature and have a source of temporary hit points, you can spend any number of temporary hit points to deal extra damage equal to the number of temp hit points spent. Again, the Shepherd has this like sub-theme of temporary hit points being important. So if you have other classes that can grant you temporary hit points, or if you have a buddy that can grant you temporary hit points somehow, it can be really useful to pick up things like Entitled Enforcement, because then you can be using those temporary hit points to basically just deal extra damage. Notably, this doesn't cost anything. You can just do this. So if you took, for example, Shepherd and Druid, you could transform with Wild Shape to get a ton of temporary hit points on a creature that is low CR but has a lot of health, and dump all of those hit points into one attack to just nuke the enemy. The Shepherd is actually kind of a sleeper paladin because they can absolutely go like ham with things like Employ Faith or Entitled Enforcement to deal tons of damage to a creature out of nowhere. So it's kind of fun. Although that does take a lot more finessing and it takes more creative class building, whereas the Paladin, you just get everything you need right there with Smite and those spell slots that refresh on a short rest. Let's take the left path over here now to grab Young Blood. Young Blood says that you can spend a stamina point to automatically succeed on a check or saving throw against a charmed or fear effect. And you must do this instead of rolling. So you can't roll to see if you succeeded first and then decide to do this. You need to, like, when you're getting affected by a fear or charmed effect, you can be like, Young Blood, I'm spending a stamina point. Doesn't happen. Next up, we'll pick up an ASI. And then extra attack. Now, the Shepherd does get extra attack, although it does come at a 9-node commitment, which is much later than the fighters. And you'll see this commonly with other martial characters. Extra attack doesn't come online nearly as soon as fighters usually. There's a few that get it about the same time. And the 10-node commitment on the left side over here is Designate Destiny. Designate Destiny says that you can expend a stamina point while making a skill check or attack roll and add 10 to the number rolled. You can choose to do so after you roll the die, but before the DM tells you whether you succeed or fail. And this is a really fun way to just be like, I'm going to hit you, you know? Just the last class I was talking about, the Magus, would love to take a few Shepherd nodes to pick up this if possible, to be able to, you know, just be like, I'm going to hit with this attack. Plus 10. I mean, you roll a 14, and you're like, I don't know if that's going to hit or not. Probably not. It's a 24 now. So that's another thing that I just love about the Shepherd, is just being able to be like, no, this is going to happen. I force it to happen. And now on the left side here, we got the staff side of the Shepherd, and on the right, we'll have the Slings side of the Shepherd. I'll start with the staff options, but of course you can take a little bit of both if you want to do a bit of ranged and close-up fighting, but realistically, if you wanted to go for one playstyle or the other, most of the features are going to be based around that specific playstyle, and so it would really depend on your build. That being said, let's pick up Staff Striker here. Staff Striker says that when you make a melee attack with a quarterstaff or another staff weapon, you gain a +2 to attack and damage rolls made with that weapon. Just off the bat, this is a very fighter-esque feature that just gives you extra damage, specifically with a staff, a quarterstaff, allowing you to just make the quarterstaff an effective weapon, basically, because right off the bat, it's just not the best weapon. But when you get a +2 to damage and attack, I mean, that's like a magic weapon, and it's like not bad. Continuing forward, we can get Herding Protocol. Herding Protocol says that you gain proficiency and expertise in animal handling. A bit of a niche feature, but if your game uses a lot of animal handling checks, it can come in pretty handy. We can then pick up another feat, and then we got two options here. Let's go left first to pick up Unending Stamina. This is one of those that you honestly probably won't want to pick up, even if you're just picking up the middle branches for multiclassing purposes. Unending Stamina says that you regain expended uses of stamina on a short rest. Next, we can pick up Immense Slam. Now, Immense Slam says that when you hit with an attack, you can expend a stamina point to deal an extra 10 damage. You'll see this a lot with the Shepherd, actually. The way that I kind of designed it was that the majority of the features are going to basically say, use stamina, get plus 10 to something. Now, intake hits is not like that, and there's a lot of features that aren't like that, but Immense Slam is a great example of when it does actually do that. This is basically Great Weapon Master, or in my version it's called Bloodthirsty, allowing you to just dunk an extra 10 damage on your attack. Immense Slam does say that when you hit with an attack, you can expend a stamina point to deal an extra 10 damage, implying that you can only do this for like one attack. Like you can't spend 3 to do 30 extra damage. You can only do this for one attack. But you can use something like Designate Destiny to add 10 to the number rolled, and then spend 2 stamina points to do Immense Slam and that at the same time to get a guaranteed hit with a guaranteed extra 10 damage. And if you do have Bloodthirsty, pop that right on top to do an extra 10 damage on top of that. Some really fun combos to really just shoot your damage for Shepherd up to the stratosphere. This is definitely a damage-based class. And to finish off this end, we have a node that is just a proficiency bonus increase, but this is a 7-node commitment. But if we continue forward, we can grab Staff Versatility. Staff Versatility says your use of staffs for combat has increased in skill. You now have a plus 10-foot reach when using a staff one-handed, and the damage dice can be a d12 when using it in two hands. This just makes the staff kind of a cool weapon. Like, hey, I can hit from way far away. If I'm one-handing it, it's going to do less damage, but I am I got a ton of reach. But if I want to get up close and personal, I'll be doing a ton more damage. Again, that's on top of the plus 2 to hit and damage that you're getting from Staff Striker that you almost definitely have, given that it comes before Staff Versatility. Next up, we've got Break Defenses. This is a bit of an interesting one. It says that when you attack a creature that has temporary hit points, before dealing damage, remove all the temporary hit points. This is one that I think will really depend on your DM how much you'll get out of this. For example, if I was a DM for a player that's playing a Shepherd, I'm going to be using creatures that use temporary hit points often, just so that they can really feel excited when they use Break Defenses and be like, there's no temporary hit points on that creature anymore. And I'll be like, dang it, even though I knew it was going to happen in the first place. But it's something so cool that I think is interesting behind specifically targeting things like temporary hit points on a class like Shepherd. That can be really fun if your DM is along for the ride. If your DM never uses temporary hit points, then this feature is kind of pointless. But it would be super cool for a player to, see an enemy mage cast Arm of Agathis on themselves and just break their defenses before the attack even hits. Next up, we can pick up another ability score improvement. And then Vengeance. Vengeance says that you can expend a stamina point to deal extra damage with a staff equal to the largest damage taken on one of your allies within the last round. You must declare the use of this feature before rolling to hit. So basically this is an attack buff where you're going in for an attack. Before you roll to hit, you say, I'm going to use Vengeance. And for example, if your ally just got breathed on by an ancient red dragon and took a ton of damage, your staff's going to deal a ton of extra damage this turn because they just took a ton of damage. That being said, if you're fighting a bunch of little goblins that all hit for 2, this is not going to do anything and is not worth the stamina point. So a bit of give and take. This is really good against boss creatures, but not the best against groups of enemies. Next, we'll grab a proficiency bonus increase and the 10-node commitment. And over here is Refreshing Nature. Refreshing Nature says that at the start of each of your turns, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your strength or dexterity modifier. It's your choice. So this is just another way of saying, hey, there's some synergies built in for temporary hit points. If you've got Entitled Enforcement, you can be dumping those temporary hit points into one attack per turn, basically. So, it won't stack much with extra attack, but it's a great way to just always be topped up. Now let's move into the sling side of things over here on the right. Sling expert is our first node, and it says that when you use a sling, you can double your proficiency bonus for attack rolls. Also, your range with the sling increases by 60 feet for both increments. This just basically, just like the staff one, makes the sling a viable weapon. It's very fighter-esque in the way that you're just buffing a specific playstyle, but the sling and staff both needed kind of a buff if you're going to play as them, and if you want to just dip shepherd just to get this feature to use the sling, I would not blame you. Next up, we'll pick up a feature. This is Protect the Flock. It says that when you roll initiative, you can spend a stamina point to grant one of your allies within 20 feet of you the ability to use intake hits once within the next minute. So this is, again, the feature over here. Notably, you don't actually need to have intake hits to do this, because you could just gun it straight over here to grab Protect the Flock. So interestingly, you could actually grant your ally the ability to use intake hits without being able to use it yourself. But that doesn't really matter. The point is that they'll be able to, once within the next minute, use intake hits, which allows them to take a source of non-force damage and reduce the damage by your nodes in Shepherd, which, again, if it reduces it to 0, will convert into temporary hit points in excess. So if you're a really high-level Shepherd, that's a lot of hit points reduced. We can move on to this feat next. And then, again, I'll take these slower path first, which gives us Tinker with Nature. This is a very flavorful feature, but could come in clutch depending on your campaign. It says that you can spend 10 minutes in a forest, by a riverside, or some other nature setting to create a small object or tool out of the natural materials available. You can make any piece of equipment worth 2 gold pieces or less. This equipment lasts for up to 1 hour of use before falling apart. Just another great flavorful feature to really drive home the idea that this is some person that is just standing outside with their flock, protecting them, and totally in touch with nature. Very ranger-esque feature, but again, could be useful, could be not, depends on your campaign. We can move forward to something that will be useful, especially if you're using a sling. That is Piercing Shot, which says that when you make an attack with the sling that hits, and there's a creature in a straight line from you through the first target, you can roll a second attack against the second. If it hits, deal damage to that target as well. This is basically, Piercing Shot. It's based off that gunslinger feat that is in Pathfinder, where you can basically shoot through 2 enemies at the same time to deal damage to both of them. It's basically that. And the 7 node commitment over here is a proficiency bonus increase. But let's move up to Styling Sling. Styling Sling says that you can spend a stamina point to use your bonus action to take the attack action. That is that boost of damage that the Shepherd might really want. And by boost of damage, I mean boost of attacks. You don't actually need to use Styling Sling with a sling. You could use this with anything. It basically just says that your stamina points can be converted into attacks. And if you can, pick up extra attack or +1 attack, even better, from another class alongside Shepherd, you can turn your bonus action into the attack action for, at least the amount of times that you have Constitution modifiers. And that can be really nice. Next up, we can grab a Close Torrent, which says that when you hit with an attack against a target and there is a creature other than your target within 5 feet of you, you can deal half the damage from the target attack to the other creature. So this just says, if there's 2 creatures near you and you're attacking one of them, you can deal half the damage from that attack to the others. But after that, we can pick up another ability score improvement, and then move on to Scatter Shot. Scatter Shot says that you can use your bonus action and expend a stamina point to target all creatures within a 100-foot cone. They must make a dexterity saving throw. DC is 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your dexterity modifier. Or take 1d6 plus your dexterity modifier bludgeoning damage, or half as much on a successful save. Now, you can only do this the amount of times you have stamina points, but assuming you get unending stamina or at least wise stature, you'll have a decent chunk of them. This is all targets within a 100-foot cone. It doesn't do a ton of damage, but this is your horde shredding option. We can move on to Body of Energy, which states that we can spend a stamina point to remove a level of exhaustion from ourselves. This is one of the strangest abilities that I think the Shepherd gets, but definitely a flavorful and fun one, where basically you're taking your stamina and just converting it into rest. Now, this can jive well with a few different playstyles, most especially that of the Oracle, which gains exhaustion levels when they're casting their really strong spells. And the final node that the Shepherd gains access to over here, another 10 node commitment, is Sturdy Stance. It says that when you make a saving throw to avoid being pushed, you are not pushed. If you are pushed with no saving throw given, you can make a saving throw to avoid being pushed, and the DM will determine the DC for this save. This has got to be one of my favorite features that the Shepherd gets, because it's just, I mean, the Shepherd is kind of all about being like, no, this happens. I force it to happen. And Sturdy Stance just kind of embodies that fully, being like, oh, you're trying to push me? That doesn't happen. I don't even need to make the save. It just doesn't happen. And when they're like, there is no save, you say, oh, no, there's a save, and I'm going to make the save. The Shepherd, I love the flavor behind just being like, this happens, I force it to happen, I will expend as much energy as necessary to make it happen. And that's what I really like about the Shepherd. Of course, this is a class that I made myself, so I have a kind of a soft spot for it, but tell me what you guys think about this in the comments below. Otherwise, let's move into some feats that really work well with the Shepherd. The first feat I'm going to talk about, I actually mentioned earlier when I was talking about it, and that is the martial feat, Bloodthirsty. It says that you do not have disadvantage when wielding heavy weapons, no matter your size. On your turn, when you score a critical hit with a melee weapon, or reduce a creature to 0 hit points with one, you can make one melee weapon attack as a bonus action. And then if you take this twice to get it at its level 2 ability, you can take a -5 to hit on your melee weapon attacks. If you do so, you gain a +10 to the damage on the attack. I think this jives really well with the overall, just layering damage upon damage on top of your enemies that the Shepherd really goes for. And notably, Bloodthirsty is not Great Weapon Master. You do not have to be using a big weapon to do this. It does give you that extra bonus of not having disadvantage when wielding heavy weapons, but the main idea behind Bloodthirsty now is that it's just kind of any weapon can do it. As long as you take both levels, that is. Another melee martial feat that's really great for the Shepherd is Polearm Master, because of course it is, you're using a quarterstaff. Polearm Master says that when you take the attack action with only a glaive, halberd, quarterstaff, or spear, quarterstaff being the important one there, you can use your bonus action to make a melee weapon attack with the opposite end of the weapon. That attack uses the same ability modifier as the primary attack, and the weapon's damage die for the attack is a d4, and it deals bludgeoning damage. You, of course, can also take this again to get it at its level 2 benefit, which says that also using the same weapons, other creatures provoke opportunity attacks from you when they enter the reach you have with that weapon. Notably, their earlier feature that grants you +10 to your reach with the quarterstaff would stack on top of this, meaning that you have a huge area of effect that allows you to provoke opportunity attacks. Super nice. As far as initiate feats go, we got to talk about the Shepherd Initiate feat, which says that when you make a ranged attack against a creature that's larger than you, gain a +1 to hit and damage for each size larger than you it is. So if you're fighting a, gargantuan threat and you are playing like a halfling or something, you're going to get a +4 to hit and damage, which is pretty nice. If you can figure out a way to play a tiny class, it's even better. But I highly doubt that most DMs would allow you to play as a tiny character. But hey, if you can get there, you can get there. Otherwise, on average, this is probably going to be +1 to a +2 on most of your attacks, which is still not bad. Initiate-wise would be the Barbarian Initiate, actually. Now, this really depends, and you're probably going to want to be playing the staff-based Shepherd if you want to play with this feat, but it allows you to choose a skill, and you now use Strength instead of its normal stat for rolls on that skill. And you can take this up to 3 times. It's the same feature every single time you take it, but you can get up to 3 of your skills using Strength instead of a different modifier. So if you want to be more, ability score focused, focus in on Strength and probably Constitution and Wisdom. I mean, the Shepherd does have kind of a wide variety of ability scores that it kind of wants to be putting high builds into. So being able to kind of take some of those more important skills like Investigation, Stealth, and putting those into Strength so that you're more, you're more fine-tuned, more sad, more single ability score dependent, could help out a lot. Another one I'll bring up here is Medium Armor Master. Again, Shepherds do get medium armor proficiencies, and this says that when you're wearing medium armor, if a creature attacks you with a melee weapon attack, they will take bludgeoning damage equal to your proficiency bonus. And then if you take it again to get a level 2 ability, it'll grant you the ability to, when you're wearing medium armor at the start of your turn, you can take a -3 to AC in order to boost the bludgeoning damage from this feat by your strength modifier plus your dexterity modifier until the start of your next turn. So this is kind of a huge give and take ability to be like, oh, if you do hit me, I'm going to be doing some damage to you. And if I want to do even more damage to you, like if I'm not worried about losing my HP right now, I can take a -3 to my AC in order to boost it by my strength and dex, which if you're playing a shepherd that really goes into that sling and staff playstyle, probably going to be a decent modifier to add. So fun. I like the Medium Armor Master. And the final one I'm going to bring up here is Master of Techniques. This says that when you take this feat, choose one of the following qualities: Finesse, Thrown, Versatile, D10, Two-Handed, Strung, or Reach. Whenever you use a weapon or make an unarmed strike, the quality chosen can be considered a quality of that weapon. So this is a way to kind of like mix and match certain qualities that you might want on a staff and sling with some other multi-classing options. This isn't one that I would just recommend to any generic full class shepherd. This is more of a option that can really help out if you're trying to make a cool build that uses a sling and tries to get the most out of it. So giving it the ability to be like two-handed, for example, might jive well with some other ability that grants a different benefit. And of course, if you take this twice to get it at its level 2 ability, you can take a -3 to hit for a +6 damage on any attack you make with a weapon or unarmed strike. Another just great ability to allow you to force damage through, which again, shepherds really like to do that, so I think this is pretty flavorful. Either way, I like the shepherd. I think it's really fun to kind of be that forceful, this happens no matter what, I'm not going to let it not happen type player. But if that play style doesn't jive well with you, that's okay too. You don't need to play the shepherd. There's lots of other classes. In fact, in total there's 40 classes, and I've only gone over like 6. So we've got a lot more in the making to look at. And the next one I'm going to look at is the Gish. This one was suggested to look at because they want to know the difference between the Magus and the Gish, which there is quite a bit of a difference. But we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, subscribe to see more, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye. I'm going to sneeze. That was a weird sneeze.